Hey guys, and welcome back to the to the channel, Iron Wolves Productions. We are going to be recording today the changelog for the faction of Dunland. Now, Dunland is primarily a nation of spears and pikes in this submod. Um, we have borrowed a few unit models from Divide and Conquer, but we'll get to those here in a little bit. So really, I've organized things into three slash maybe like 3.5 tiers of sorts. Your first tier really consists of your Dunmen units. Second tier, Dunlending units, with maybe one exception of that. The third are your Dunherd units, and the last are your Wolf's units, and these are your General's Bodyguard that you really want to use, most likely. Note that you are not like Rudour in the following ways. You do not have very many options for shock infantry. You do not have any thrown projectile units, and very few of your units can actually hide. You are an open field faction that fights with pikes, spears, and some line holding shield wall sorts of units. So we'll get started in the first Dunman tier. Now I say that, and I've got the Dunlending clansmen here, and the Dunlending units are usually in the second row here, but in this case, the Dunlending clansmen have such poor stats that I thought they really belonged along with their Dunman counterparts. Just looking at their stats, there's nothing that's changed at all from normal Reforged. Their attack is abysmal. Their charge is virtually non-existent. Their defense is really bad, but they've got a little bit of a shield value. Got a little bit of armor that can be upgraded. I'm not sure if there's an aesthetic change to that or not, but anyway, you can upgrade it, I think, just once, so you can get your defense up to 7. You want these for their cavalry bonus, mainly. They can do Shiltron, but with the stats as poor as they are, I don't really see how that helps you that much. But they're here. You can get, I want to say I think you can get 4 maybe before the red limit. I'd have to check again. So we're going to move on to the Dunman Spearmen. Now, this was a unit that was available to both the Wildman nations of Dunland and Rudour. It is now only available to Dunland. We'll show you the Rudour units when we get to that changelog video, but the Dunman Spearmen are only marginally better than the Dunlending clansmen. Their defense is higher. Their attack is 5, which was a bit higher. They come in smaller numbers, though. So it was 250 for the Dunlending clansmen and 203 for the spearmen. The clansmen are much, well, they're about 100 florins cheaper. So if you want lots of cheap spears, Dunlending clansmen are the unit you want. They're kind of the orc fodder equivalent for Dunland. So not a whole lot of difference. They're only marginally better than the clansmen. They haven't changed at all in this mod, in this alternative version of Reforged. So we'll continue on to the lumbermen that Dunland now have. This is one of 3 units of shock infantry that you get, and only 2 of those are actually armor piercing. So this is your lowest tier of shock infantry. Lumbermen are exactly the way they were in normal Third Age Reforged. Recruitment cost is the same. All the stats are the same. They can hide. They're real. Where they really shine is that they can hide anywhere, and they're effective against armor. They are now available to Dunland as well as I think the other factions that get them are Cardolan, Dale, and I want to say Dorwinian, but I could be wrong about that. So I've added Dunland to that list, and I may end up adding that to Rudour as well. We'll see. Probably not, though. Dunman Pikemen. So this is the first of your two choices of pikes. They are cheap pikes, but pikes are pikes at the end of the day. They have an attack of 7, which is pretty strong for a unit of pikes. Note that their armor is pretty poor, however. It's only 3. They're cheap, 550, and you're getting 203 of them. They've got the phalanx, the spearwall formation. They can hide anywhere when they're in loose formation, and they've got the bonus fighting cavalry. So they haven't changed at all from normal Reforged. It's the only thing about them that's changed is they are only available to Dunland, because Dunland is the pike and spear backed up with some decent bows and some crossbows, and we'll get to those here in a bit. That's kind of Dunland's meta. Moving on here, we've got the Dunman Hunters. I tried and failed, unfortunately, to turn these into a crossbow unit, so I've just left them as bows. They are exactly as what comes on the tin. They are a cheap unit of archers. Their missile attack is 4, which is pretty standard. They have a melee attack of 7, which is not too bad. So they're kind of discount men-at-arms without the shield. Essentially, once they're through with all their ammo, you get 200 of them. So 200 of any type of arrow really will start to add up in damage. I think you can take 2 of these. That's kind of the meta for this mod. Is any one unit of archers you're probably only going to get 2 of. So this is the Dunman Hunters, only available now to Dunland, unlike in normal Third Age Reforged, where they are available to Rudour as well. They are only available to Dunland. All right. Bandits, which you all know likely. Bandits are available to any faction so long as the game type is set to specials. The game era is set to specials. And so I just wanted to point out that Dunland have bandits as well. And finally, on this first tier, you have one of two of your only choices of cavalry. So you've got these guys, and you've got an elite General's Bodyguard tier unit of cavalry that we'll get to here in a bit. But the Dunman Outrunners. They are a very cheap, lightly armored, poorly shielded unit of lance cavalry. Now, so they don't even get a bonus against other cavalry. That might change before I try to make this a public submod. But they come in a decent unit size. They're pretty cheap. They're effective against armor. Their attack is kind of weak, but with a decent charge bonus, so they're not too bad. Pretty basic lance cavalry. Just be careful in how you use them. Don't leave them tied up against other cav for too long, because they do. Well, I suppose I'll have to look into their files to see if they have a bonus against cavalry. If they don't, they will, because they are armed with spears. But leaving them in prolonged combat with like a unit of mounted melee knights is probably not a good idea. So just use them to take out lancers, use them to take out horse archers. But they are going to be one of your only mounted tools against factions like Cardolan and Rohan, who are your chief enemies in this mod. All right, so moving on to the next tier, we have the Dunlanding Veterans. Now, Dunlanding Veterans have changed a little bit in that they are now armor piercing, where they were not before. They were balanced against Gondor infantry is kind of the standard I've been using. So they've got the same attack value and armor piercing, but they have a weaker shield of 5, which isn't too bad really. And where the real trade-off comes in is in their defensive skill of 3. That's very poor. I'm trying to make it so that swords have units armed with swords have the highest defensive skill, followed by axes and maces, followed by spears and pikes, that sort of thing. That's generally how it goes, assuming you're comparing units of a similar tier. So they get a mild bonus fighting cavalry, which they had before in normal vanilla 3rd Age Reforged. That bonus has been reduced, though, significantly. So they get a very slight bonus against cavalry, so don't expect them to take down something like Haven Knights or anything like that. They're not as potent against cavalry as they were previously. And then over here, we have the Dunland Berserkers. They are long time. They've been in various iterations of 3rd Age and its various submods for a long time. They do get an armor upgrade, and that comes with an aesthetic change. They get like a steel helmet, and I think they get like shoulder guards or something. You'll have to check it out, though. But this is your second unit of shock infantry, and this is of the 3 you have. You had the the lumbermen before. You've got the Dunland Berserkers, and of the 3, those are the only 2 that are effective against armor. Unlike the lumbermen, though, your attack is improved significantly with the Berserkers. An attack of 11. Charge bonus of 8 versus a charge bonus. Well, the lumbermen have a larger charge bonus, but you start out with a higher base attack value. So what these guys are going to do for you that the lumbermen won't, is that they will stand up in prolonged melee much better than the lumbermen. But note that with their really low armor value and their low defensive skill, they will get shredded, particularly by arrow fire. Even if you end up giving them an armor upgrade, an armor value of 4 is still pretty poor. They don't have a shield value, and their defensive skill is very low. So watch out for that. Particularly units that are armed with shield and sword will definitely do damage to these guys. So bear those things in mind. They do have, a mild bonus fighting cavalry. I'll have to check to see what the exact value of that bonus is, but it will expect that by the time this is released publicly that it will be the same. It will only be as mild as what the Dunland veterans get. So in this tier, just to recap, you've got the Dunland veterans, which are your line-holding but armor-piercing unit. And you have the Dunland Berserkers, which are your real standout unit of shock infantry that you've got as Dunland. Note that shock infantry is probably going to be more in Rudour's wheelhouse by the time we get around to them, but I've given you a couple units so that you've got something to work with. All right, so we'll move on to the Dunherd tier. Now you've got 4 units here. 4 units here. You've got a unit of marksmen. Now, these are sort of a hybrid of marksmen and rangers. But as I've stated in previous videos, there is very little in the way of body piercing in this mod now. They are not like other rangers in that they do not have armor piercing, because you've got plenty of other options that are ranged armor piercing. Your crossbows, your javelins, if you want to get bandits. But what they do have going for you is they shoot poison arrows. So they will drop the morale of a faction that has better morale than you, probably down to the level that you have, or a faction that has equal to or less morale than you will just see their morale completely collapse if you use these correctly. The way in which they mimic rangers, though, so they can hide anywhere. And they have a ranger's melee stat, so we'll just show those to you. Total defense of 14 with a defensive skill of 10. That's pretty strong. They've got a melee attack of 11, which is, again, very strong. Those are ranger levels of melee stats. You get 160 of them, which is a solid number. And they fire a strength 5 poisoned arrow. Let's see. I don't think we tell you what the ammo supply is here, but it should be listed in the lobby whenever you're building your army. So bear that in mind. This unit was known as the Gwathlo Trackers. They are no longer available to anyone but Dunland. Carlin do not have these anymore. So that's the Dunherd Marksman. You get 2 of those like you do any other unit of marksman archers before the red limit. So you have very good marksmen, even compared to like the Western Kingdoms of Men. Your marksmen can probably go toe-to-toe with a lot of them in certain ways. Note, though, that their armor is, like most of the rest of your army, relatively poor just because you're a nation of wildmen. Armor value 4 that cannot be upgraded further. Pretty weak, so try to make up for that by using their ability to hide anywhere, and then throw them into melee and get them really stuck into the thick of it so they can make good use of their defensive skill stats once you're out of ammo. Next, we have the Dunherd Watchman. Now, this is one of the first of the units I've taken, unit models I've taken from Divide and Conquer. You may recognize them as having been the journeymen of Bree. I've taken them and repurposed them for Dunland. They're kind of I guess if I had to describe them as briefly and concisely as I could possibly do, they're kind of a watered-down unit of a watered-down version of Menhiriath sharpshooters that Carlin have. But looking at their stats, you can tell that they are definitely not in the same league as the Menhiriath sharpshooters. They do get a shield value of 5. They can't use their shield, though, and they don't get a shield wall formation or anything like that. It's just to make them a little bit more survivable, staying up to arrow fire. Their defensive skill is very poor. Their armor is very poor. Their melee attack is really bad. They have virtually no charge bonus, and their missile attack is less than that of other crossbows. Now, they are effective against armor with both their crossbow and the little mace they pull out, so if you do manage to land a hit in melee, it will crunch through armor. The missile attack is decent compared to the other crossbows. When we get to Rune and Umbar, you'll see that the Eastron crossbowmen and the Corsair crossbows have a similar missile attack, because these are not meant to be an elite unit of crossbows. They're a very low or medium tier unit. But they have a normal crossbow range, a pretty normal ammo supply. I think it's 15. And they do get a little bit of a speed boost, so they can run around quickly. They don't get to hide anywhere like some of other comparable units of crossbows, but they do make up for that in that they have a shield value, so bear that in mind. And when they're in melee, they have effective against armor there too, even though their melee stats are hardly better than even orc fodder. Right. Moving on to your next Dunherd unit. Here again, this is another unit model I've borrowed from Divide and Conquer. You have Dunherd Swordsmen. These are just a pretty basic sword and board unit. I measured these guys up against Gondor Infantry and Rudauer Swordsmen when I was making them. They're kind of halfway between the two. They will beat Rudauer Swordsmen in a fight, but they will most likely lose to Gondor Infantry. I haven't tested that yet. I've just compared their stats when creating them. They come in a unit size of 200 if you're using the huge unit scale. They are good. They are a good sword and board unit. Looking at their stats, they have a pretty average attack, pretty average charge bonus for their tier and unit type. They have a pretty good defense given that they're a nation of wildmen. Compared to the Western Kingdoms of Men, say like the Ethelon Men at Arms at Dol Amroth get, you're down about 5, I think. Note that the Dunherd Swordsmen can actually increase their armor a few times. That was kind of an artifact of being a unit taken from Divide and Conquer. That could change if I figure out how to take that away from them. But yeah, overall though, they're pretty good. They can hide in woods. They can't hide anywhere. They get a little bit of a combat bonus in woods, though I'm not sure what that actually does. You get 3 of these before the red limit because they are, for a nation of wildmen, they are very good swords. So I balance that by giving you 3 before the red limit. They're decent price, I think. That may stand to come down to like 500, but no less than that, because you are getting 200 on a huge unit scale. I think they got a shield value that was halfway decent. Yeah, shield value of 7. That's only 1 less than what Gondor infantry have, and that is exactly what Rudauer swordsmen have. So that's pretty standard. Overall, they're pretty standard sword and board unit. Their numbers make them, I would say, put them in the upper half of all the basic tier sword and board units. I would suggest using these because you don't get very many units that can really hold your line other than your basic spears and your pikes. So, those are the Dunherd Swordsmen. Up next are the Dunherd Pikemen. This is the 3rd of the 4 units that I have borrowed from Divide and Conquer. These are excellent pikemen. In the playtesting I've done, they defeated the Herenadine pikemen of Rudauer, and they defeated them soundly. So they are, the recruitment cost, it says, varies because I think as an artifact of being from Divide and Conquer, somewhere in their code they count as being a mercenary unit. I'll take that away so that you can actually see. Well, you'll of course be able to see when you're the price when you're building your army. But their cost is, I think, 800 florins, and you can only take 1 of them before the red limit. Or maybe it's 2. If it's 2, it's going to be changed to 1. So they've got an attack value of 9, which is outstanding for a unit of pikes. That is very, very good. They get a charge bonus of 4, which is pretty... it's kind of in the upper end of things for a unit of pikes, if I remember correctly. Their total defense is wrapped up mostly in their armor, but also in a shield value, which is not normal for a unit of pikes. So I really tried to make the Dunherd pikemen a good unit of pikemen to reinforce the idea that Dunland is a unit of phalanx-forming infantry. You get pikes, you get spears, and lots of them. Even your elite units have, as we'll see here in a little bit, have halberds, and they are your only unit of halberds when we get to them. They come in a unit size of 150. The cost, as I said before, I think it's 800 florins. And I think that's everything to say about them. Really good unit of pikemen. I highly suggest you take these in your army list. And, finally, we're moving into the General's Bodyguard tier. And these are all named after the hero of Dunland, who is one of the only people to ever defeat Rohan in a fight, and that is Wolf. These are your Wolf's Mounted Reavers. They were previously known as the Riders of Orthanc, but I wanted to make Dunland a little bit more independent from other nations, so I didn't want them to be completely tied to Isengard. I didn't want them to be just a knockoff version of Root Hour, and so you've lost a lot of units in your roster. This is the total number of units in your roster minus any artillery that I may or may not add. If Dunland do end up getting artillery, it will just be a catapult. Because they're technologically proficient for a nation of wildmen, but they're not really. They're no Western Kingdom of Men or dwarven factions, so they have clear limitations on what they're capable of doing technologically. So what is there to say about Wolf's Mounted Reavers? Well, they're armor-piercing with both their crossbow and their... I think they pull out a mace, I want to say, whenever they're in melee combat. I think it's a mace. They have a missile attack of 12, which is fantastic. A melee attack of 13, which is, again, very good. Their defense is pretty evenly spread out, and they have 2 hit points, which is a common theme for all of the units named after Wolf. So Wolf's Mounted Reavers are 2 hit points. They've got a good bonus against cavalry. They're effective against armor. This is one of my favorite units of cavalry in the game because of just how multi-purpose they are. They are your Swiss Army knife cavalry unit. They can fight in melee against anything really well, except, of course, pikes and spears. They can fight other cavalry really well, fight basic infantry really well. They do a really good job of kiting enemy cavalry with their crossbows. In fact, I have replays saved somewhere in normal versions of Reforged where I was using this unit that's basically just been renamed, and I think I may have changed the cost or something, but anyhow, I was using this unit in normal Reforged against Withy Rockdoor or Horse Lords of Olmo, one of the 2 elite elven cav units, and because I was able to kite them by using my crossbows, I took very little damage once they finally did get into melee because they were so depleted, having been shot at by their crossbows. And then once they did make combat with me, I had the armor-piercing maces and with an anti-cav bonus. So these, I cannot stress how really good this unit of cavalry is. Probably your best unit, one of your best units in your entire army. But note, as I said earlier, they are one of your 2. You only have 2 units of cavalry because Dunland is not like their neighbors and enemies in Rohan. They are not a nation of horse lords. All right, moving on to your second of the 2 Wolves units. These are the Wolf's Reavers, the dismounted version. They're pretty much the same as they were in normal Reforged. They have a total defense of 30, which is fantastic, and it is exactly spread evenly between armor, defensive skill, and shield. They can do a Shiltron, which is amazing. They have a really good bonus against cavalry, as you would expect a unit of halberds that can go into phalanx mode would. They have effective against armor with their crossbows and their halberds, and for a pretty good cost. And they, like the others, they are 2 hit points. I think they have a slightly increased mass to reflect their shield value that they get, as well as the fact that they can go into a phalanx formation too, a Shiltron rather. Yeah, this is honestly where I would put my general if I were playing as Dunland, either here or if I guess you could put it in. I don't like to put my general units in cavalry very often, but if I were going to, I would put them in Wolf's Mounted Reavers. Right here. I'd put them in these guys. One of the Reaver units is where I suggest you put your general. They will survive there. They will do damage with them. And as Dunland, you need... It does... you are somewhat prone to morale shocks, so... Just as virtue of being a nation of wildmen. So bear that in mind, and use the Reaver units. And finally, there's one last unit here, and this is one of your units that can hide anywhere. Minus the bandits, of course, who are not unique to you, and who you only get when the game era is set to specials. They are one of 2 units that you get that can hide anywhere. And they are Wolf's War Maids. This is the final of the units that I have, unit models I have borrowed from Divide and Conquer. They are a unit of all women, actually. They come in a unit size of 60 on a huge unit scale. They have the chant ability, which even when not active, they do get a threshold level of morale boosting for your men and morale debuffing for enemies. They frighten, as I said, enemy infantry, and I think they frighten mounted units as well. Have to check here. It's just frighten nearby enemy. Okay. Yeah, they inspire nearby troops even when they're not chanting, but you can really start to stack that effect once you have them chanting as well. They can hide anywhere. They get a combat bonus in woods. Again, I'm not sure what that really does for you. They have a decent charge value though of 10. These are, I can't really think of a unit in normal Reforged or in Divide and Conquer really that's like them. Of course, in Divide and Conquer, these would just be the war chanters, but here, now that I've repurposed them for multiplayer use, they now have 2 hit points, being one of the units named after Wolf. So 2 hit points already makes them very good. They come in a unit size of 60, which is okay. Their attack value of 20 is really good, but relative to the other General's Bodyguard two-handed sword masters, it is a little bit lacking. They have a charge bonus of 10, as I said, which again is kind of lacking a little bit. They have a defensive skill of 15, which is pretty average for similar General's Bodyguard two-handed sword master units. Where they are let down, though, is they do not have a shield value, and they have an armor value of 3. Now, like the other, the Dunland units that I've borrowed from Divide and Conquer, there is still a little bit of artifact where you can get an armor upgrade, I think 3 levels. So, I mean, this could go up to an armor value of 6, which, for reference, is only 1 less than Dunedain captains from Cardolin without an armor upgrade. So you can tack on the armor a little bit. But where they really shine is so that they will decimate basic infantry in melee, but where they really shine is in their chanting, and the fact that you can take 2 of them before the red limit at a cost of 1,000 florins. I think that's a very good price. I really want people to be taking these. These are a very good unit. To make up for the fact that they will be ripped to shred by arrows. They can hide anywhere. Love this unit. They're fantastic. They will lose against other two-handed swordmaster units of a comparable tier, though. So against even Dunedain captains, which are kind of on the lower end of the spectrum for that type of unit, they will die, and they will die handily. So don't throw them into a fight against Dunedain captains. The only unit I can think of where they might stand a decent chance, especially if you've taken 2 of them, are against Isengard's Berserkers, and that's only because they have no armor virtually, and so you will, with your high melee attack value, you'll be able to just cut through their 3 hull points pretty quickly. But otherwise, don't throw them in against generals tier two-handed swordmaster units, and God forbid you ever try to fight Haven Guard with these guys. These these girls rather, because they will get ripped to shreds. And I think that's everything. Yeah, we've covered everything. So that's Dunland. I am not going to be adding any more units to them. This is how they will. This is what they will consist of. Um, One or two stats might change here and there by a little bit, but this is pretty much the final version of Dunland. Over here, I've just said Rohan civilians, but we're not actually going to fight that. They will do well against nations like Rohan, against nations like Khand, against nations like Dol Amroth if Dol Amroth really lean into their cavalry force. They will be able to go toe to toe for a little bit with a Dunedain nation like Cardolan or Rudauer, especially. And your pikes can even rival some of those that Gondor can bring. But do not expect. But if you're going against a heavily armored faction like Gondor, say, do not expect to beat them in melee. You're going to want to hold them at bay in melee with the units that you've got and shoot them. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to say about Dunland. So we will come back next time with a new faction changelog overview. I'm thinking it'll probably be Gondor, Angmar, or Mordor. Those are one of the three I'm thinking will be next. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.